and welcome back to my channel, where in this second part of the Ranger class series, I will be showing you how to create a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Ranger class character within Fantasy Grounds. I will be utilizing the character wizard to create the basis of the Ranger before moving on to adjusting the character sheet once it has been created for any minor elements the character wizard does not fill in, and then finally setting up the various features that the Ranger will use within the Actions tab. As I have already gone over what a ranger is in the previous video, I will jump directly into character creation. And for reference, I will be creating a Wood Elf Ranger with the Outlander background. So let's get started. The first thing that you will want to do is access the character wizard. That is available through this PCs button here, and then accessible utilizing the blue star. And for those of you who are colorblind to blue, just simply hover over your mouse over the star here, and you will see the word Open Character Wizard pop up. The words, I should say. Now, when I select the elf, I'm going to be prompted to choose a subrace. The Eladrin, Dark Elf, High Elf, and Wood Elf are the 4 subraces that exist within the basic grouping of the player's handbook provided races and those provided by the Dungeon Master's Guide. In this particular case, I will be choosing Wood Elf. And you will notice that several things have already been set up for us. We already have dark vision available to us. We are a medium-sized creature with a speed of 35. We have longbows and longswords as our large, non-finesse related weapons, and short bows and short swords for some of our finesse features there. We have the perception skill by default, we have 2 languages, and we have these particular traits that we may want to look at and see if they require setup within the Actions tab. And now that we have the racial features selected, I'm going to move on to the Stats tab, and all you do is click on it or just hit the next button when you're on the Races tab. Now, I prefer utilizing the dice roll feature, and the reason for that is you end up with a wider range of variety, if you will, when it comes to the total number of stats that you get. So I'm going to quickly select die roll, and as you will see, it will automatically roll for me. Oh, and I already have an 18 here. That is potentially a really good start, but these 2 7s could theoretically pose a problem. The die have already taken care of removing the lowest dice, and as you can see, this option utilizes the roll 4d6, drop the lowest methodology. Now, as nice as that 18 is, I'm going to roll a couple more times to see if I can actually get a little bit better of a roll here, because I'd like to have at least a reasonably high dexterity and a reasonably high wisdom, potentially a high-ish constitution. Everything else I'm not overly worried about, but I may choose to stick with this. We'll see. And on the very next roll, I immediately got some stats I'm actually reasonably happy with. And the reason being is I already have 2 16s here. That's really all I was looking for, because I can now move this 16 over to the dexterity. That's going to give me a starting dexterity of 18. And if I move this 16 over to the wisdom, that's going to give me a starting wisdom of 17. So I already essentially have my 2 primary stats set up and ready to go. My strength is reasonably high. I don't really need it any higher than that. I have a pretty good constitution, so I'm going to have at least a decent amount of bonus hit points when I start leveling this particular character up. And the intelligence and the charisma are okay. I don't need to worry about them. This is a very good, above average character roll. And with that, let's go and actually select our class. So I will hit the next button this time so that you can see what happens. So we are now on the class tab. You will notice that this particular window doesn't really adjust until you've made some adjustments here, and then it might fill in some additional information. So for example, we'll see this class field fill in. I'm going to choose Ranger. And as we can see, a few more things popped up here, and our class has also filled itself in. But I also have the ability to select a particular proficiency. Well, I'm not quite ready to do that because I know that my background is going to give me a set of proficiencies rather, that I don't necessarily want to have in conflict with what I choose here. And those two are athletics and survival. So I don't want to choose this. I also don't want to choose this. But as this ranger is already perceptive, I also don't want to choose this. So that means I can actually choose quite a number of starting skills here and be very proficient. So I'm going to choose stealth, nature, and it's a toss-up between insight and investigation. I believe investigation is an intelligence skill, and insight might also be intelligence, but it might also be wisdom. I'm going to go with wisdom. Or insight, I mean. Okay, so now I have all of the choices here that I want to do. Now you'll notice that there's nothing here for the multi-class. And I'll explain why. The reason being is that with 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you are starting as a total character level of 1. In order to multi-class, you have to have a total character level of 2 or greater. So you cannot choose a multi-class at level 1. You can, however, choose a multi-class if your starting level is going to be level 2. So you could actually choose to have 2 level 1 classes if you so wish. But you cannot, for instance, choose Ranger and Ranger so that you can end up specializing in both of the various archetypes. You really need to go with Ranger and maybe Cleric, or Ranger and maybe Paladin, or Fighter, or even Wizard if you really wanted to. You shouldn't choose a second Ranger class. In fact, I don't even believe that that is actually legitimately allowed to do. Some DMs might allow you to do it, but they're going to punish you for it. But we are now essentially ready to move on to our background selection. And as I'm going with Outlander, I already have that in mind. And as you can see, we are starting off with 6 skills. That is practically ridiculous. But I also need to choose a language as well as a tool proficiency here. So for an Ranger, I'm going to go with Orc. And I'll just go with a small pan flute. And at this point, if you so choose, you do have the ability to put in a character name and save. In fact, you don't even have to put in a character name. You can just hit save, and a character sheet will be created with all of the information that you have selected. However, for the purpose of completion, I'm going to show you the other 3 remaining tabs that exist on this particular creation wizard. And that first one we're going to go to is the inventory one. And as you can see, we could potentially find all of our gear, all of our weapons, and all of our armor right through this particular screen. You do have a set of starting equipment that you're going to want to select, unless you decide to go with the gold option, which is another option. Generally, however, I encourage any player who's going to be going through a campaign that I'm putting them through to start off with their character selection, because to be honest, I want to avoid the whole initial shopping fest that has to occur whenever you start a campaign. I like to actually get the characters going within the campaign. I don't want to have a preamble about them selecting all of their equipment before they start that campaign. I may do one day, but I have to really be in a good mood for that. So, what I want to actually start off with here is going over my class equipment sheet first. I'm going to choose scale armor or leather armor, and I actually prefer the leather armor in relation to a ranger. And I want to showcase something here. When you type in a filtered search word here, it's only going to show you anything that has that keyword in the group or category that you have chosen. In this particular case, I want the leather armor, so you just drag and drop it down. Next, I want 2 short swords. Obviously, they're not going to be under armor. So let's go to weapons. And I want 2 of these. And I'm just going to modify that to be 2. A Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack. This particular character, in my mind, is an Explorer, less of a Dungeon Explorer, if you will. So I'm going to go with the Explorer's pack. And drop that into place. Now, this pack does include other items. It includes a bedroll, the mess kit, the backpack itself, and a series of other items here. Here, it's going to remain as an explorer's pack, but when the character sheet gets created, it's going to explode out into all of the various items. And I'll show you that on the inventory page once we get there. What else do we need? A longbow and a quiver of 20 arrows. So let's go with arrows first, because I believe that is on this page. Correct. And then we'll go with the longbow. And I want the bow, not the sword. There we go. And that finishes everything that we need here. Now, one type of musical instrument, okay? I already did that for the tool. Now, this isn't necessarily what you get. This is what you are proficient in. This is your starting equipment here when it comes to the background class. We need a staff, and it is not the quarterstaff. It is actually a staff. Oops. I keep dragging the text. I don't know why. I'm having an issue today. A trap, and we want a hunting trap. A trophy from an animal you have killed. Well, if you look for the keyword trophy here, you're not going to find one. So I'm going to show you a couple of options that you can do here to actually potentially create one. We want clothes, so we want traveler's clothes in this particular case. And a belt pouch. Now, if you look for the word belt, you're not going to find one anywheres in any of these groups. But if you look for the word pouch, you will see that we have a pouch here. And that's what you're actually looking for. And you can just rename that as a belt pouch. And then we start off with 10 gold. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't go here. This is actually what it's costing you to buy all of this, not what you're actually getting for your gold or anything like that. So, this is now essentially done. The only thing we have to worry about is the trophy and the gold when we actually get to the active character sheet there. We do not start off with spells. In fact, we don't get spells until at least level 2, I believe, or in the case of the ranger. And we do not start off with any feats unless you have Tasha's Cauldron of Everything module loaded and have chosen the custom lineage. At that point, you will be able to choose a feat. The other only way that you will choose a feat is if you're starting with a character that has a level 4 or higher level. And then you'll be able to choose one, and it will total up how many feats you're going to be able to choose. But I don't need that, and in this particular case, I'm going to call this the Ranger, and then click Save to create the actual character sheet. And there we go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is select a portrait. This is just a standard, there it is, D&D. This is Elf. And I will want a wood elf in this particular case. Let's go with this one. That represents a ranger to me. Now, something I haven't done in the past is that you'll notice that the portrait here is also here. Well, this can also be a token, but in pretty much all cases, and I don't think it's possible for a player to do this, but a DM will be able to provide an asset full of tokens, provided there are tokens loaded. Now, in this particular case, I don't have any loaded. So I don't have one I can choose here. But I like the top-down tokens so that your character looks like they're standing on the map that you're being placed onto, not this little icon that you get that acts as a square or a circle, like a pog. I prefer an actual token. So I may show that a little later, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Now, everything on the first page here looks like we're good to go. I don't think there's anything here that needs adjustment. So I'm going to quickly pop over to skills. And you can see that we have all of these particular skills here. What is this indicator? I have no idea what that indicator is. I've never seen that before in my life. That's new. Anyway, we do have abilities that we will want to go and take a look at. So we're going to want to set up our favorite enemy. I will want to explain the Natural Explorer feature as well as the Wanderer feature that comes from our background here. We also have a couple of traits that we might want to look at. So I'll set those all aside. Now, we have a trophy from an animal that you have killed. Okay, so as a ranger, you do get this trophy. In fact, as an outlander, I should say, you do get this trophy. Well, there's no real easy way to get one. You could potentially roll on the trinkets table if you wish. That's one way to do it and hope you get an actual trinket that represents a particular piece of an animal or part of an animal. I generally like to go with something like a wolf's tooth, bear claw, rabbit's foot, anything along those particular lines that give you that personalization. In this particular case, I'm going to be going with a wolf tooth. So all you do is you simply select anywhere's in here and hit enter once, and you'll get an empty line. I'm going to call it tooth from Alpha Wolf. And I'm going to give it a bit of a weight. They generally are relatively light, so 0.1. And that's all you have to do. So that takes care of the trophy. As for the gold, there's a treasures grouping down here that you'll want to fill in the following information. That's platinum pieces, gold pieces, electrum pieces, silver pieces, and copper pieces. And we got 10 gold, and we want to put that there. And you will also notice that all of the equipment up here is adding up to a specific amount of weight that we're carrying. So we're already a little bit over top of our halfway mark to our weight. But there's no additional equipment we really need to add. And in fact, I can actually now close this. I might want to look at rolling the Outlander origin here, however. So we shall see, because this will sort of tie into our favored area here, or our favored region that we can be able to pass through relatively quickly. We'll see though. First, however, I want to go through and actually adjust the inventory here. I have this empty backpack here, but I don't want it to be empty. Oops. To adjust everything, I want to be able to set up all the items that would potentially be within the backpack, or at least tied to it, such as the bedroll being tied to the bottom of the backpack, being associated with that particular backpack. And all I have to do is type in the starting of an item that already exists within our inventory here, and it will finish the rest for me. I did not hit enter when I moved down to the next line. All I did is use the up and down arrow keys, because if you hit enter, you will end up with an empty item that you'll have to go clean out. I don't like when that happens, so I just use the up and down arrow key to move things about, so that I can go through and actually fill in where all of this is. Now, that staff is how long? I think they're generally relatively small, but it has 4 pounds. This thing could actually be relatively large, so that's probably something you'll be wielding in some way, shape, or form. Necklace around the neck. For that, these are backpacks, although torches don't generally fit in the backpack, but they could potentially attach to the side of it. Now, when I click somewhere else, all of that should sort itself out so that it is now associated with the backpack, and it's now grouped and indented a little bit. There's a reason why I do that. The reason I do that is because it makes it nice and easy for me to actually unequip all of the items that are there if I have to take my backpack off. I don't have to go and click each individual item. I just simply click the backpack, and everything that is grouped into it will just simply go with it. This is perfect for having to take the back off to traverse a river, or swim through a tunnel, or going through a very tight tunnel in some way, shape, or form. And then if you forget to put it back on, all of these items are essentially gone. If you remember to put it back on, it's now equipped or carried, and all the items remain with your character. Things like the traveler's clothes, or the leather armor, or the longbow, it's just simply assumed that you're carrying them around in some way, shape, or form, but it does give you the freedom to be very specific. So, for example, you could say that this is a pouch that is tied to your belt. This could be in the left sheath. I don't know how to spell sheath, but you get the point. The staff could be held in your hand or strapped to your backpack through some form of belt loop or a backpack loop, and your arrows are most likely going to be in a quiver, which we don't have. And that's how you could actually go through and set up the organization. Next, we're going to want to address our actions or actionable features here, specifically our weapons. We have a longbow, but we don't have any ammunition for it. We do, however, have 20 arrows in a quiver. So I'm going to put 20 arrows, and now I have 20 arrows. When I actually attack something, they're automatically going to get used. You as the player are going to have to remember that you're going to be picking these up, but you're not always going to be getting arrows back. You're only generally going to be getting about half of your arrows back. And the reason being is there's a 50-50 chance that your arrow is going to break. So if you shoot 4 arrows at a particular target, chances are you're only going to get 2 of them back. And that's an average. Additionally, this particular weapon is a 2-handed weapon. So you're going to want to click this here and actually set that to be 2-handed. Now, it's not going to change anything here for the damage type because this is strictly a 2-handed weapon. It doesn't have any other versatile capabilities. Now, the other thing, these short swords are light and they are finessed, which means that your dexterity can be used to actually make up the attack bonus and the damage. And in this particular case, that's already been taken care of for us. We don't have to do anything for that. But I have 2 short swords. I have an on-hand and an off-hand one. So I'm going to split these 2 short swords into 2 things. So primary. And then I'm going to set up another short sword here. Pop this open. Drop that into place. Actually, that should be just 1. Now, if I drop this into place, is it going to re-add that? No, it's not. So I need to go back and look for another item here. Short sword. Drop this into place. I now have a second short sword, and this will be offhand. Now, when I go back to the Actions tab, I should have 2 short swords. One is going to be my primary hand. The other is going to be in my offhand. And you'll see that the second I did that, the attack bonus, or damage bonus rather, went away. And that's how the offhand works. You'll just simply do 1d6 of piercing damage. You won't be doing 1d6 plus 4. I believe this is a new feature. I think it might have been introduced with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but I'm not entirely certain. I don't know where this came from. It just randomly appeared. So I'm not entirely certain which module added this. In addition, I don't have any spells. So I'm going to just get rid of that for now. But the advantage of this setup is now I don't have to worry about trying to calculate out what happens when I use a weapon in my offhand versus my primary hand. Well, it's already done for you. Problem solved. So let's go take a look at the Outlander here and decide on my Outlander's origin. And I'm going to just simply make a random roll here. Yeah, that'll make sense. That'll fit with what I was leaning towards. So I am a hunter-gatherer. And that would explain why I have the hunting trap. Now I can make the modification here, hunter-gatherer, to indicate that that's where my origin, came from. Or I can modify my wanderer thing or create a reference here for that. I generally like to throw it here because then I can immediately see that I rolled the hunter-gatherer, or I chose the hunter-gatherer, and that's gatherer, not gatherer. There we go. Origin. So I can essentially get rid of this. I don't need that anymore. Now the wanderer feature is extremely useful because what it gives you the ability to do is to essentially remember the terrain and any map references that you have around the area that you're in. And essentially it gives you the ability to remember a specific location of a town or the best location to find food or water, things like that. And as a result, you can find fresh food and water for yourself and up to 5 other people each day, provided the land offers berries, small game, water, and so forth. This isn't something that necessarily has to be actionable, but it is something that you're going to be most likely wanting to use periodically. So I would just keep this in mind that you have this particular feature, and if the Dungeon Master asks you to share it with them, you just simply drag and drop that over there. You could also put it into here so that you have a usable indication within the chat log, because this is something that is consistent across all of the games, that you're going to use this particular skill to find food for everybody in the region. This way you don't have to worry about the utilization of any rations that a group might be carrying if you happen to be in an area that is just absolutely lush with small game or berries and water, stuff like that. And just for completion, I'm going to leave this in the Actions tab, and I've grouped it under an Outlander group so that I can just minimize it and leave it out of the way. Next, I'm going to go over the racial features that I acquired when I chose the Elvish race. And they're Trance, Mask of the Wild, and Fey Ancestry. In relation to Trance, elves don't need to sleep. Instead, they go into something called a reviere, something along those lines. I can never actually pronounce it. Reverie or something like that. You're essentially meditating, is what it is. And as a result, you get a full, complete rest in a 4-hour rest period instead of the required usual 8 rest period. So generally, rangers, specifically elves, usually will start and finish the watch order. And that's because they don't necessarily have to rest as frequently or as long. So an elf can start the rest order, the next person wakes up, takes over your position, you get some sleep, and then if there's a requirement to do so, you can potentially take the latter portion of the rest period and do the watch order on that particular side of things and still get a full night's rest. So it gives you the ability to study your spells, swap them out if you have to, stuff like that. So unlike other races that require a full sleep period of 8 hours, you only have to sleep for half of it. So you could theoretically do 2-hour watch hours. Mask of the Wild gives you the ability to hide even when you are only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, and other natural phenomena. So if you're walking through a bog that happens to be very heavily and densely foggy, you could go through and potentially hide. So this is something that you could potentially make use of from an action. And in this particular case, I'm going to drag this into here and just set it under the elf grouping, even though I think it came from the wood elf side of the actual subrace. But that's just to indicate to the Dungeon Master, hey, I'm going to use this so that I can hide, and then you roll your stealth check to actually attempt to hide. In relation to Fey Ancestry, there is no way to test on an incoming spell effect such as Charmed or Magic Sleep. So really there isn't a way that we can create something that will always be there to automatically do a roll for that particular situation. But there are a couple of things that you as the player can do to set up a couple of reminders. The first is you can go to this special defenses feature and say immune magical sleep and advantage charmed. And that could act as a reminder to you that you are immune to magical sleep right off your main tab here, as well as that you have advantage on charmed saving throws. Really is what it is. Charmed save for completion. But what we can do is set up an advantage roll on a save so that you can actually take advantage of that. So let's drag this into place. And this is just simply automatically being picked up through the parser, so we can delete the actual effect there. And then we're going to create a new one, and it's going to be an effect. And what this will be is Fey Ancestry, semicolon, ADV SAV, and you can optionally put in a colon or leave it blank. It doesn't much matter. This is going to be for yourself, and it's going to expire on the next roll, but it doesn't go away. It is recommended that you don't, however, apply this until you have an incoming charmed spell that is attempting to charm you in some way, shape, or form, so that you can actually add this to your character, make your roll, and it will automatically drop off. Well, how does that actually work? Well, first off, let me throw this under elf, because it's going to be an actual feature that came through your elf. Now I'm going to show you how it actually is going to get used. So I've gone ahead and set up a quick little scenario in our combat tracker here, and I've added the ranger, and I've also added a top-down token, so you can see that here. I loaded a few up on the DM side just so I can actually drop one in to give you an idea as to what that actually looks like. Now, let's say that this succubus is the active creature that's coming in to their turn here. Well, they have a charm feature here that requires a wisdom saving throw to be made by anybody who they're attempting to charm. Well, the dungeon master will have to remember that they need you to activate your advantage to saving throw, and you will have to remind the dungeon master about this before they make the roll. So I'm going to drop the effect onto the ranger. I'm then going to trigger the attempt to actually charm our particular character. Unfortunately, it hasn't rolled because I didn't have you targeted. I had the ape targeted. Hang on a moment. I always do that. There, now I have you targeted. Now I'm going to attempt to charm you. And now we can see that we have the two rolls. In this particular case, both rolls were just essentially low. I mean, we dropped a 2 when we rolled a 7 or selected a 7. But you can see that 2 die rolls were actually there, and we have an ADV indicator to state that it was an advantage roll. Well, now this particular person is charmed. Well, we're not immune against charmed. We just simply get advantage on a saving throw related to charm. Now, if the succubus had a spell that was going to put this particular character to sleep, we would avoid it because we're immune to it. But there isn't an effect that we can add in order to actually prevent against that. So we're essentially out of luck. For this latter part, we just have to remind ourselves that we have the ability to be immune to magical sleep. And that's everything we need to do for Fey Ancestry. With the favored enemy feature, you are now able to gain advantage on wisdom or survival checks specifically to track your favorite enemy, as well as on intelligence checks to recall information about them. There are a specific type of enemies that you can select from all the way from aberrations all the way through to undead, or you can take 2 humanoid races and choose those instead, such as gnolls or orcs. You can also learn an additional language if the creature you have chosen as your favorite enemy happens to have a language. So if you chose, for instance, beasts, most likely you're not going to have an extra language you're going to be able to choose from. But if you decided to choose gnolls or orcs, you could take the language that they themselves speak as an extra language in your known languages list. Now, unfortunately, there really is no easy way to set up an effect or anything like that that will, quote unquote, check the type of the target for you to be able to gain advantage on those particular rolls. The easiest way to deal with this is simply to state that you're going to be making a survival check for your favorite enemy, and then click on this advantage button here before you actually execute the survival roll. Excuse me. And that will give you the advantage roll there. Additionally, when you do the intelligence check, it will also roll with advantage. So it's very quick, convenient. Click this, boom, roll, you're done. Now, unfortunately, the damage aspect of the favorite enemy seems to have gone away. This appears to be an adjustment that has been made to the 5th edition rules. So one of the things that I claimed in the introduction isn't necessarily actually true anymore. There are, however, alternative versions to the favorite enemy feature that you can get that bring that feature back. But by the base standards of 5th edition, you don't get that capability. You do gain the ability to gain 2 new additional favored enemies, one at level 6 and one at level 14, plus their associated languages if they happen to have one. But the trick is, how do you track who your favorite enemies are at this particular point in time? The easiest way is simply to modify the description or listing of your actual favored enemies here in your abilities tab and just add a comma delimited list of the various creatures you have chosen. That's all you have to do. Your next feature, called Natural Explorer, works very similar to the favorite enemy in the sense that you get to choose a particular terrain. So in this case, let's say forest or mountain regions. And when you're passing through those regions, you gain certain benefits. One of them being that you do gain advantage to intelligence and wisdom checks whenever you make a particular wisdom, survival, or intelligence-based check within those particular terrains. Additionally, your proficiency bonus is doubled if you are using a skill that you are proficient in. So for instance, if I were to roll a survival check within, say, the mountainous region, and that mountainous region is what I have chosen for my favorite terrain, then I would be able to set the double proficiency bonus here while I am rolling a check in that particular terrain for something associated to that particular terrain. However, you have to leave it as proficient for everything else. So what do you actually gain with this? Well, difficult terrain no longer slows down your group. Your group also can't become lost unless it's done by magical means. So you can no longer have that random die roll that goes through that the DM does whenever you're traveling through terrain you're not familiar with. Well, if you got a ranger in your party and they're familiar with that level of terrain because it's their favorite terrain, you can't get lost unless it's being done magically. The ranger will also gain the alert portion of the aspect, meaning that you can't be surprised. You don't gain any other bonuses like the +5 to initiative, but you are unable to be surprised while you're in this particular terrain. Even if you're in the process of going through and foraging for resources or navigating or even tracking another creature, nothing can spring upon you and surprise you. If you happen to be traveling alone, you can essentially move at your normal pace when you are attempting to be stealthy, whereas typically if you're stealthy, you're moving at half your normal speed. You gain advantage, if you will, when it comes to foraging. So if you're foraging in this area, you gain twice as much food that you normally would. So let's say, for example, your DM makes a die roll to indicate how much food you would normally get. Let's say 5 rabbits. In this particular case, you would gain twice that, so you'd be able to gain 10 rabbits. The other capabilities, and this ties immediately into your actual wanderer skill associated with your background, in that you're now able to feed up to 5 people. Well, if you're in favored terrain, you can get enough food for 10 people. And lastly, when you're going through and tracking a particular creature within your favorite terrain, over time, you'll be able to gain how many creatures you're tracking, what their exact number is, whether they're large, small, medium, and how long ago they had passed through that particular area. So whether it was a day, whether it was an hour, within approximation. So you're not going to get to the minute. You'll probably get something like they literally just passed by here as your response, or it seems very fresh as your response. You're not going to get specifics. But it definitely gives you an advantage to be able to give you an indication as to, am I getting closer? Chances are, if you're passing through terrain that you love. And lastly, you gain an additional favorite terrain at levels 6 and level 10. So let's say you could theoretically start off with grassland and then later add mountain and swamp. It's entirely up to you. How do you indicate, though, that you have chosen that? Well, in this particular case, where is it here? Natural Explorer. So I'm going to add to this, and I'm going to give it, let's go with forest. And that'll be the terrain that you're passing through for your favorite terrain. And with that, that actually sets up everything that we really need to deal with in order to actually have this particular character ready to go. There are probably a few other things that you could go through and do and get them finalized and get them set up. But for the most part, everything is ready to go and you can very comfortably play this particular character and not have to worry about it. As such, I hope you found this particular video informative, and I hope to see you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.